Good day to you. I want to discuss with you a burning issue that faces the world, the Ukraine, and what does it mean for future geopolitical events. So I called it the Ukraine quiz. Why did Russia invade Ukraine? We can also remember the debacles in Iraq when US invaded Libya and Egypt and Vietnam long ago. What are the other trouble spots that may invite problems like Israel or Taiwan? What happens when USA diminishes? We know that USA was laid back in their response to Russian aggression, and some believe that's how Russia was encouraged to invade. Now EU arose to fill the gap. So will EU be the new global policeman with a 10-nation confederacy? Do we have any information about the 10-nation confederacy, and what would EU be like in the future, in the near future? What would happen to US in the near future with this waning influence? What would China do? Would China be the real king of the East? Will Russia get involved in any more such wars? What is the most powerful 10-nation confederacy that is now in formation? What did COVID shutdown teach the national political strongmen? Because there are very strongly nationalist people. And when globe was taken over by the science czars and the global elite who are globalists, who are looking for a one world regime, but there are strong nationalist leaders like Vladimir Putin, who will fight for their territorial integrity and even beyond. What would that war look like between those who want a global regime with digital control, digitized currency, for which this pandemic provided? How will they balance off or fight it off with those who are for strong nation-minded alliances, or a strong nation looking for alliances because they felt threatened when the world went through shutdown, coerced health laws, and future similar events? So I see it like that. The COVID pandemic and the politics of it pushed nation-minded, nation-centered strongmen to do alliances before globalists get the world into their hand. So this is what I see. So who will be in the battle between the science czars and globalists on one side and nation strongmen? For instance, globalists, global elite recommending green revolution, no fossil fuels and things like that. And some nations like UK have greatly agreed to this kind of theory. So I'm not talking on this side or that side. I'm just giving you the way things are balanced and how will the balance of terror go. Because in the case of UK, balance of terror did not hold for peace. So how will nationalist strongmen like Putin behave in a world which is increasingly get up by a global agenda using science and any other means possible? I hope you understood the context. So here is a very sad statement about the nations made. For I was hungry and you gave me nothing to eat. So at the end of this period, at the height of scientific genius, this is what we see. Slides are moving down the slides. So I've gone to slide number 2. My direct timeline will not have the slides, but you will soon get another clip with the slides on. If you need my slides from which I am speaking, or any other scientific clip I have done, please send to this WhatsApp number a request, +94 76 313 4800, +94 76 313 4800. Also, you can download my clip and my app golden nuggets. I am Dr. Lalith Mendis, golden nuggets from App Store or Google. I need some of my digital books. My digital books. All of my digital books, one copy each. Yes. So here is the statement about nations and analysis for our times. I was hungry and you gave me nothing to eat. So there's going to be hunger created by famine, as well as the way the stocks and shares on grain market goes up and down. We know there was a grain shortage in 2008. And we have a book in the Bible, the last book, describing the phenomenon of 4 horses. 4 horses. I have a full clip on that. I can send it to you if you ask me for the 4 horses clip. First horse is white, and he has all this. I'm explaining to you the global arrangements of political phenomena. So that last book of the Bible, book of Revelation, describes in chapter 6 4 horses. First one is white. He has a bow without an arrow, which means he's shooting invisible arrows, and he is on a philosophical mode conquering the nations of the world. Second one is a red horse doing it with a broadsword, political violence, bloodshed, communism, and so on. Third one is a black horse, and the rider is armed with a pair of scales weighing and his economic maneuvers make grain very scarce. Inflation is sky high, and the rich get richer, poor get poor, and these things have been happening for some time. And the phenomenon is described, megatrends are described through the pantomime of 4 horses. The 4th horse is pale, and 4th horse ushers global famine and global plagues. So when the plague came and took the world for 2 years, we wonder whether we have come to some end of a series, so to say. So what is next is the question we will ask. But here the nations speak, I was hungry. So different kinds of techniques with food and the natural grains going down and all that will have effect on the world's food supply. And we can see one thing COVID did was a worldwide shortage of food, in which our country is also sadly involved. Then it says, I was thirsty and you gave me nothing to drink. This is a description by Jesus Christ taking a survey on nations. Now, some of you listening may have heard of Jesus Christ as a good person, a religious leader, that he founded Christianity, which is true. But he also gave long series of events that would transpire in the world at a certain time. So now, in a moment, we are going to identify that certain time that he mentioned after we finish the list of things he said would come upon the world. So we have looked at a world that is getting hungry, world that is getting thirsty, meaning one aspect of it is next world war may be for potable water. Water that can be drunk is a rare resource, and thankfully we can thank God for it. Sri Lanka has 126 rivers from which we can drink, and Sri Lanka is a nation rich in potable water. We can even export water, though we are at present going through a dry season. Third feature of the world is, and the nations is, I was an alien and you did not invite me in. So if you observe with some wisdom, you will find nations are causing migrants. At present, Sri Lanka is losing a lot of young talent, saying they want to seek a future abroad. Then in the Middle East, many wars were engineered and many migrants were created. America's Mexican border is always full of hundreds of thousands of migrants. So what happened to the family of nations? What happened was, in parallel to dwindling of family, personal family, because God gave the world to personal family, dwindling of marriage and redefining marriage, dwindling of family values, not being faithful to one spouse all your life. That was how marriage was designed. Be fruitful, multiply, fulfill your role, and steward the resources for the next generation. That was the Genesis mandate for family. God works for families and God works for next generation. We must understand this. Similarly, nations were meant to be a family of nations, and it's at a place called the Tower of Babel that languages were formed. Now, the theory of evolution cannot explain the different languages. I speak as a scientist. Of course, my primary training is in pharmacology. My last substantive post was as head of department of pharmacology in a state medical faculty. So I do have a book that I like to show you. This is that book. I have called it Life, Light and Love. This is available from all Sarasavi bookshops and also Apeksha bookshop in Borella and in Muratua. This describes how the languages were formed, how the nations were formed. It is found in Genesis chapter 10. I am speaking on the topic of how aliens are created, how migrants were created, how every nation lost families in the sense son is in one continent, daughter is in another continent, and the old parents are left to look after themselves. This is not how the Good Shepherd designed the world. This is not how the Good Shepherd designed family. This is not how Good Shepherd designed nations. My point is this, my thesis is this. When you deride or diminish personal family, people in a nation don't behave like family members. Then people between nations or nations between nations don't behave like a family of nations. That's how we have ended at this stage of dog eat dog and each man for himself, and as the old axiom says, God for all. So this is the scenario why we have created so many aliens, so many migrants, insecure young people in different continents, and they get caught to the woke culture, they get caught to the cancel culture. Any ism, any philosophy, any manipulator can use this youth in any part of the world for any purpose that is counterproductive. That's what has happened. So nations losing their treasure, their economic resources to global planners, everything is planned that sovereign nations lose their economics, lose their political sovereignty, and now they are losing their youth and their future and generations. You have to see this happening, and you have to understand I would like to call it spiritualize. Otherwise, we go with the day's happenings and not see the thread. I am trying to connect the thread. Sadly, it's not a golden thread. Once upon a time, it was a golden thread. One generation lived for the next generation, and we did our utmost for our children, our grandchildren. And that's how politicians were supposed to be. This generation looks after the resources for the next generation. It all went bust. From 1970, we have been on a consumerist extravaganza, consuming all till the ecology is irretrievably ruined. That's what has happened. For 40 years, we ate it all. We didn't think about the next generation. So the three features I have already mentioned is I was hungry, and no, you did not give me to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me nothing to drink. Then all kinds of wrong appetites have been also fostered. Thirdly, I was an alien and you did not invite me in. So many strangers moving around in the world, and the breakup of the family has and short-term marriage or not at cohabiting together has resulted in an alienated world that desperately needs reconciliation, alienation between races, alienation between societal factors, alienation between sometimes even a 10-year-old gap. You look like strangers increasingly with the digitization. 5 years apart, you don't recognize each other. So those long-term relationships are now fractured. Many people are isolated in the screen life or some other life. alienation. I was naked and you did not clothe me. So nakedness is a big time industry, as you know, the vulnerability and also the poverty that has come with it, moral poverty, spiritual poverty. So this is the list that Jesus Christ gave. He said in the end days, that's the term he used. In the end days, these 5 things will pop up. I was naked and you did not clothe me. Hungry, thirsty, alien, naked. I was sick, which means diseases multiplying. So COVID has gone all over the world. Now we know it was an engineered virus. And many world-class scientists have disputed the management that was adopted for it. Thankfully, in Sri Lanka, we were able to introduce some effective medicine early in the disease that you don't have to die. Not a single COVID patient needs to die. That's a tragedy. If treated properly from day one, that's a tragedy. So this I can say with confidence and authority because this is my field of expertise. So sickness spreading around. I was in prison, you did not visit me. So increased oppression, freedoms removed as it's happening in Ukraine. Initially, the Ukraine civilians were able to resist the Russian invasion and Russia got stuck. But as of this morning, there is a 40-mile convoy of Russian military weaponry forces on the highways coming to Kyiv. So we don't know what will happen. France has said they will send troops. Economic sanctions have been made. But we know just in 24 hours this week, world has changed quite dramatically and quite dangerously. I want to read a passage that gives this line of things. This is how it says in Luke's gospel. You'll remember Luke was a physician who came to check out this new faith happening in Palestine, because Luke's boss said, go check it out, because even aristocrats were getting, wealthy people were getting interested in this new faith Christianity, whereas initially it was only the poor. So it was a Roman noble who sent Luke the physician. Greeks were the physicians, Romans were the wealthy. That's how it went. Romans had brawn and Greeks had brain. So Luke the physician came to check it out and reported to his master in the form of a gospel he wrote. In it he captured this, the last sermon of Jesus Christ on the Mount of Olives. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, great earthquakes, and in various places plagues and famines. So he gave an indication of what he's talking about. Now we know world has had wars all the time. We know that. From the beginning of time, world has had wars. I told you about Genesis chapter 10. There's a list of 70 names. Genesis is the first book of the Bible, list of 70 names. I strongly recommend that you get my book, this Life, Love and Light. It has a chapter on the 70 names. And these names can be found in ancient documents and ancient history documents of Herodotus, Ptolemy and others as the names of the forefathers of the present nations. So to whom do the 70 names belong? They belong to the sons and grandsons of one man. That man was Noah, who lived in 2350 BC. He had 3 sons, Ham, Shem, Japheth. Ham's descendants populated Africa. Japheth's descendants populated Europe and also Russia, that means. And Shem's descendants, grandsons and great-grandsons, populated Middle East and Asia. So for instance, Russia had ancient areas called Gog, Magog, Rosh, Tubalsk, and Meshech, from which Moscow came. All those names are found in Genesis chapter 10. So those names of those early forefathers, which are written in Genesis chapter 10, are found in ancient documents that describe the historic development of ethnicities and nations. Sometimes a river is named, sometimes an old town is named, sometimes an area is named. For instance, Ashkenaz is found in Germany. Gomer is found in Turkey. So I'm just giving you, if you are interested in this, just go to Genesis chapter 10 and read the names. If you are unable to do that, if you send me a WhatsApp to 0763134800, I will send you a little table of the ancient names and the historical documents that show where these ancient names went. That's how the present nations have come. So that's a little about the nations. So a time will come when nations will go on warring one another, and at that same time earthquakes will repeatedly happen. Now if you have followed earthquakes, they are repeatedly happening. Now our Asian tsunami was one such, but that signaled off a certain instability intertectonic. The world's large tectonic plates, the foundational plates made of iron and chromium, in its intertectonic border. So the Asian tsunami happened between the India plate and the Pacific plate. So India plate is a very thick plate. It has not had earthquakes, but in that Asian tsunami day, India plate dipped down, and that caused that massive wave. Since then, both intertectonic earthquakes as well as in the middle of a tectonic plate, an earthquake developing. For instance, since the tsunami, the tectonic plate under us, Sri Lanka, in the sea about 3 kilometers south of Dr. Head, there is a magma activity developing, which means the tectonic plate has got thinned out and magma activity can erupt. Lava can erupt in that place. So world over, tectonic plates are saying we are getting old. So Jesus Christ delineated the time that these things will come together. Nations, wars, increasing wars, earthquakes. Now if you didn't take earthquake thing seriously, saying earthquakes have been always there, which is true, but it is just that their frequency and ferocity are increasing. Now we come to plagues and famines, which is in our time they have erupted. At a time when scientific genius, agronomic genius is at its highest, there's a threat of plagues and food shortages. Food shortages is largely man-made, and the last plague was also man-made. And how many else would come like that? And when our immunity is now made to be low with all kinds of artificial procedures, we will have to wait and see what other diseases may spread around. So during that time, he predicted that Jerusalem will be surrounded by armies, which happened in AD 70. Then he said they will fall by the edge of the sword. I am reading from Luke chapter 21, verse 24. But at that, and led captive into all nations, Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So Jerusalem was under Gentile or taken by foreign nations till 1967. Jerusalem came back to Israel. I'm now not talking politics, I'm just talking what happened. 1967, of course, is politics, but I want to say I'm not talking partisan politics. I'm just recording what happened. In 1967, Jerusalem came back to Israel. Then this says, at that time, there will be distress among nations. What for? In perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves. Men's fainting from fear and the expectation of things coming upon the world. So this is quite specific. After 1967, when Jerusalem had returned to Jews, Jesus Christ said there will be another phenomenon of oceanic problems, roaring. Now we today understand it as global warming, and oceans getting, and people getting worried about oceanic phenomena, global warming. So this is quite specific. It brings us right down to our day. As I said at the beginning, we have been consuming in 40 years, between 1970 and 2010, what we had for future generations, and we have disrupted many ecological systems. Then what will happen? It says when these things will happen, you know that there is a drawing up of the end of the old order, because the world's economies, world's politics, world's ecologies are all in shambles. And then it was said a war will begin with the whole world getting involved with the war. Now at that point I want to get back to World War II. How did World War II happen? A war cycle happens every 70 years. In 1810, France, the mighty military nation of that time, got Napoleon, and he embroiled all of Europe in war. Parallelly, Mongolian and Mughal empires also spawned war in Asia. Imperial China did the same. Germany was the most industrialized nation in 1939, and Hitler thought of world conquest at that time, and as did Alexander the Great 2000 years prior to that. Hitler's, because of Germany's economic might and industrial might, Hitler armed Germany for war. Neville Chamberlain in Britain kept saying peace, 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 somewhat like Biden in USA, procrastinating on Ukraine, and then Hitler invaded. And Neville Chamberlain's slogan was peace in our times, and he was mistaken. Now, since 1950 we had a measure of peace. How did that come about? To stop the war, Hitler's war, the Second World War, they used the atom bomb. Atom bomb was developed by a committee headed by a brilliant physicist called Dr. Robert Oppenheimer. The American president at that time was not for the atom bomb. They got Einstein to write to him and say, we might have to consider this. Einstein was not a man of war. He wasn't, though he gave the equation that made the atom bomb, E equals mc squared. But he was compelled, thinking Germany will get to the atom bomb first. So US made it first under the leadership of Dr. Robert Oppenheimer. They made the uranium bomb and call it the Fat Man, and they made the plutonium bomb and he called it the Little Boy. So they dropped the uranium bomb on Hiroshima, and immediately Germany surrendered. But so all the scientists said, don't use the plutonium bomb, which is far more devastating. But Dr. Robert Oppenheimer said a strange thing. This is a scientific experiment. We must complete the scientific experiment. He also said in the experimental atomic explosion in the Nevada desert, when he saw the huge devastation, he said, I have become the destroyer. So Dr. Robert Oppenheimer had a peculiar side to him. This is history. Why are we looking at history? How science makes war. And what will happen in our day, we will presently see. So in Hiroshima, it was a big city. About 30,000 died. But they dropped the plutonium bomb, the Little Boy, on Nagasaki. 79,000 died, and more continued to die in neighboring cities because of the nuclear fallout. Because Robert Oppenheimer said, we must complete the scientific experiment. The world changed forever. So after World War II, there was great fear about nuclear confrontation, and they drafted the UN Charter. And UN adopted as its motto a passage from Prophet Isaiah in the Bible. Prophet Isaiah lived in 740 BC, and he said this: he will judge between the nations and will render decisions for many people. They will hammer their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they learn war. Now, this was the passionate appeal of the UN mandate. However, this passage by Isaiah refers to a time when Jesus Christ himself will rule the earth and nations will put down their swords and bombs and MiGs and whatnot. But UN hopefully adopted with great hope this axiom that nations will hammer their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. And it held for 70 years. 1950 to 2020, world saw some wars, but not world wars. Then another prophet Joel said, a time will come when nations will turn their plowshares into swords and their pruning hooks into spears, this old language, which means get ready for war with weapons. Seemingly, after 70 years of no world war, we have landed in the time there is world war or danger of it. So Einstein said this, I do not know what weapons that the nations will use for a third world war, because he saw the nuclear race. But I know this, the fourth world war will be fought with sticks and stones. I'll repeat it. Einstein said, I do not know which weapons will be used for third world war, but the fourth world war will only have sticks and stones. What did he mean by that? The nuclear devastation that would come. So we come to our final section, Israel and the Middle East. I'll be done in about 10 minutes. Israel was given a small piece of land in 1947 for Jews who fled Hitler to have a homeland. It was a very small piece of land. It was a UN resolution, a little partition. Jews were scattered in refugee camps in many nations at that time, and Britain had done very badly about them, not allowing them to come back to their nation, while Hitler was murdering 6 million Jews all over Europe. Israel declared independent statehood in 1948, May 14th, according to UN mandate. All surrounding Arab nations invaded tiny Israel, but they withstood the attack. However, it remains a trouble spot. Soon powers may desire to grab the land isthmus of Israel, connecting 3 continents, and trouble may come again on the basis of someone having a claim to the land, as Russia did about Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine saying they belong to us historically, culturally, maybe religiously. So religion may become a real flashpoint of war once again. So this isthmus, the little land bridge of Israel, north of that place is the valley of Har Megiddo, which has seen many, many wars. You might have heard the word Armageddon. Where have you heard the word Armageddon? Leon Uris wrote a novel on the separation of Berlin, West and East Berlin, last days of the Second World War. He called his novel, it was a historic novel, he based the events and the writings on what happened in 1944 and 1945, last days of Second World War, when Berlin Wall came up. He called it Armageddon. Where did he get the word Armageddon? He got the word Armageddon from the last book of the Bible, which is the book of Revelation. Chapter 16 mentions a place to which all the nations of the world will be drawn for a war. This is how it describes. All kings of the whole world will be gathered together for the war into a place called, and they gathered them together into the place which in Hebrew is called Har-Magedon. So that's where Armageddon came. Leon Uris used it. So this prediction is that world powers will have 4 global powers. They will get drawn to the place called Armageddon or Har Megiddo, the valley, to get that land bridge, because it's a connection between Europe, Asia and Africa. So this is on the scene, what will happen. So the battle lines for World War IV or World War III will draw with 4 power blocks. Daniel was a prophet who lived in 586 BC, and he gave a sequence of events. I think you should know about it so that you get the context. Daniel chapter 9, verse 24. He says, the Messiah will be cut off in Jerusalem. Messiah the Prince will be cut off in Jerusalem at a certain time. Then after that, Daniel chapter 9 verse 26, after that, Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. People of the Prince who is to come. So he is describing a prince, a global prince who will come. So the Romans and the people of the Prince who will come, destroy Jerusalem, will destroy the sanctuary, he says. So in 70 AD, Romans invaded Jerusalem and destroyed it. Important thing is, Daniel says, out of that Roman Empire now, which is now defunct, still a global prince will arise, head of a 10-nation confederacy. This is where EU's future is interesting, and European Union, especially France, arose to meet the Russian threat. So Russia is identified as the king of the north, and EU is identified as the 10-nation confederacy, the prince to come. This is what we are expecting. So when will be the next conflagration, and where will be the next conflagration? When the king of the north, who is also called Gog and Magog, will meet the 10-nation confederacy in a head-on battle. Where will this happen? When will this happen? That is the timeline since Ukraine has happened. Ukraine is not an end by itself. Ukraine had roots bringing the confrontation, and now it is being played out. And in this melee, King of the East is going to come with a 200 million army that is mentioned. Number is mentioned. There's only one king of the East who can field a 200 million army, that is China. And China is ready to flex her imperial might. She's not going to wait watching the 10-nation confederacy of the old Roman Empire taking kingship, Russia taking kingship. China will say, why not we? So China already has a highway made where they can access the Middle East very quickly. And last bit of that Belt and Road Treaty policy was Afghanistan. Very next day, President Biden withdrew US forces. China signed up a treaty with Afghanistan. So China is already there. Very close to this place called Armageddon or Armageddon. 3 world powers are there. The 4th one is identified as the king of the south. Whether it is Egypt or Arabian nation confederacy, we are to see. And what we see is USA will decrease in influence. That's the time. And where will this end up? There's a promise that this Jesus Christ will come to implement what he said he will implement in Isaiah chapter 2 verse 4. He will judge between the nations and will render decisions for many people. They will hammer their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they learn war. Now you may ask, how did you get involved in all this? Let me tell you, till I got through my advanced level from St. Thomas's College, I didn't believe any of this. My home was atheist, my father was philosophical. Of course, at St. Thomas's, every day we have to go to chapel, but I did my A-level, and I became first in the island in doing chemistry, physics, botany, and zoology in 1970. 1971 was the JVP trouble that did an insurrection. Those of my vintage will remember that very well. But I entered medical faculty, Colombo Medical Faculty, and I was batch top every exam in the Colombo Medical Faculty. Just before that my convictions changed, and I examined this book, which I thought was an old book, and I read that first book called Genesis, and I said, it's a good scientific description. That there was light was created first. Whoever did this has done it scientifically. I was impressed, not believing, not accepting, but my curiosity was aroused. Then my friend asked me also to read, my chess playing friend, he asked me also to read the book of John. I did not know John, James, or anybody because I was from an atheist background. I did not know the word gospel. So I read the book of John. He called it the Gospel of John. And I came to chapter 8. And in it, a woman is caught in the act of adultery. And according to the law of the land, she is brought to be stoned. And Jesus Christ is asked to mediate, negotiate, give his verdict. What should we do to this woman? And then Jesus Christ said, he that hath no sin, cast the first stone. Strangely, at that I'm now reading only to argue with my chess playing friend, to score a point, to prove him wrong, me right, me the scientific genius right. I thought no end of myself at that time. And I had come first in the island, in the A-level examination, just about to enter Colombo Medical Faculty, this big argument. But I was reading this in my room, and then I hear in my head, you are just like that, always with a stone in your mouth. And your friends get hurt, you don't consider it, but you want to win every debate. I said, who is diagnosing me? Everybody thought I'm a very decent chap. You are just like that, with a stone in your mouth, wanting to win every debate, which I was. I was full of head knowledge, but I realized my heart had been shrinking. Very soon, I had a spiritual experience because my inner nature was diagnosed for me. That's how my seeking came. So thank you for listening. This was a long talk, but I thought I had to set out the Ukraine background. We'll meet again with another talk. Thank you for listening.